In 1976, legendary scholar Huston Smith wrote in his classic work Forgotten Truth that we were on a collision course with disaster. While he insisted that hope is indispensable to the human condition, the notion of progress had proven to be a destructive force by almost all measures, according to Smith. And now, some 40 years later, Smith's words ring more true than ever, as diseases of despair are legion, economic uncertainty and hardship are everywhere. Social media has divided us into uncritical mobs, and the entire world itself seems on the verge of collapsing, with endless cycles of increasing violence and war. Can we rightly call any of this progress? It's amazing that so few people know of Huston Smith, considering he's easily one of the most accomplished human beings of the 20th century. Smith's resume is the stuff of legends. He helped found the philosophy department at MIT, became close friends with Aldous Huxley, took part in Timothy Leary's studies on LSD and psychedelics at Harvard, introduced the world to the Dalai Lama, and provided expert testimony before Congress to allow for the use of peyote as a sacrament for Native Americans that led to the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1994. He was also quite literally the most renowned scholar of religions around the entire world during the 20th century and beyond, before his passing in 2016. Huston Smith initially gained notoriety after writing his book entitled The World's Religions, originally published as The Religions of Man in 1958. It remains one of the most enriching, accurate, and fair accounts of the world's wisdom traditions, written in the spirit of genuine understanding and scholarship. Bill Moyers would document parts of the book in the 1990s for PBS in a series entitled The Wisdom of Faith with Huston Smith. So in Forgotten Truth, Huston Smith goes out of his way to acknowledge the unprecedented advances civilization has achieved in such a relatively short time under the guise of progress. Smith writes, quote, "On the heels of progress came science's utilitarian spin-off, technology. It multiplied goods, relieved drudgery, and counteracted disease. It again looked as if mankind as a whole was advancing. History was getting somewhere." Unquote. At its peak, all these advances obfuscated a growing dystopian undertow that is only now beginning to drown so many. The opioid epidemic has whole sections of cities reduced to harrowing wastelands of despair. Legions of lonely men are turning against themselves or against others. Isolation and loneliness are now hopeless institutions. Mindless industrialization and consumption are everywhere. And misinformation is the order of the day, as critical thinking is now at a premium. Smith had the foresight to call this out almost half a century ago, when he witnessed the incessant delusional spell of so-called progress so many were under. Smith continues, "If the ratio between evidence and hope and the idea of historical progress were to be laid squarely before us, we would be humbled in our estimate of ourselves as rational creatures." Unquote. And the crux of his argument is nearly impossible to deny as he excoriates the wildest and sardonic claims and headlines made during the 20th century amid so much devastation and war. Here's where Smith drives his point home in Forgotten Truth. Quote, "The century in which politicians preyed on hope unprecedentedly, promising the century of the common man, the war to end all wars, the war to make the world safe for democracy, the four freedoms, the great society. This century of maniacally inflated expectations has seen utopian writing come to a dead stop." Unquote. And if you're thinking that a religious scholar such as Smith is exhibiting a bias of sorts, Smith concludes with a quote from the French philosopher Henri-Louis Bergson, who influenced the likes of Jean-Paul Sartre among so many others. Quote, "Even Bergson came at the end to the view that man was being crushed by the immense progress he has made." Unquote. And of course, such dire views compelled the likes of Sartre to conclude that we all must live without hope. It's fitting that Smith's chapter in Forgotten Truth on progress is entitled Hope Yes, Progress No. But even if progress is a delusional notion according to Smith, such bleak exhortations on hope by the likes of Sartre seem naive and even comical, given the full scope of existence. The final telling line of Max Ehrmann's Desiderata is fitting here. Quote, "With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it is still a beautiful world." Unquote. And Huston Smith could not agree more, arguing that hope is indispensable to human health. For Smith, though, hope exists on a vertical axis toward God, heaven, whatever you wish to call it, and not a horizontal one confined to history and our collective lot here on earth. As Longfellow put it in his poem, A Psalm of Life, "Dust thou art, to dust returnest," was not spoken of the soul. And a personal anecdote is worth mentioning here. I had the great fortune of meeting Huston Smith at the outset of attending grad school. I asked him how it was even possible to hold on to a modicum of faith and hope in such a maddening world. Smith, who had maintained his intellectual spark even while bound to a wheelchair well into his 90s, gently replied, "In the same way that I trust that the ground beneath me will hold firm and support me, so too do I trust in God." I hope to carry that wise and enlivening reminder to my grave and beyond. With that in mind, I'll conclude with one of my favorite lines from Huston Smith. "We all carry within us supreme strength, the fullness of wisdom, unquenchable joy. It is never thwarted and cannot be destroyed." So what are your thoughts on progress? Is it real or delusional? What about hope? Please like, subscribe, and comment down below. I'd love to hear from you.